So now getting to the topic. As always, A, this is really about small to medium businesses, and B, these are my opinions. So the value may have just gone down like a rock, but there we go. Last year, we said the good news, we can stop talking about XP. Well, a year later, we can really, seriously, can we please, for the love of God, stop talking about XP? Okay, let's stop talking about Server 2003. Server 2003 is actually going through the same demotion, retirement, that Windows XP went through. So Server 2003, which includes Small Business Server 2003, as of July of this year, will no longer receive any security, any support of any kind from Microsoft. Now, XP was critical because that was the desktops. That was everybody was going at it from that standpoint, whether it be from an antivirus or any other aspect. Server 2003 in its own way is going to be just as critical, and that's especially for companies that have any kind of compliance requirements. Even if you are in compliance today, you will not be in compliance if you've got a 2003 server come July. That's especially if you've got any kind of retail applications or anything going, credit cards or anything along those lines. So, and the problem is that this is just as involved in terms of upgrading. So in a lot of cases, you have companies that are running applications. This is especially true in the manufacturing world, where manufacturing companies haven't upgraded their line of business applications for 8 years because of all of the issues, the economy and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, not only do they have to upgrade their servers, but once they upgrade their servers may not run their applications anymore. And in a lot of cases, these same companies are not on a maintenance contract because they haven't upgraded their application in 10 years. So this is very significant for small, medium companies, especially who do not have an IT department. Okay, so if you know anybody who's in that boat, you may want to remind them that that's an issue. And we've been doing these upgrades for well over the past year. And we're still doing them with companies. We have it, scheduled and time frame and all that. With some companies, it's literally, hey, let's just upgrade the server. With other companies, it's, hey, you need to come up with a completely new application that's going to run your business. Windows 10. How many of you guys saw the Windows 10 rollout or review that we did a couple of months ago? Cool. Absolutely, Windows 10. And apparently there's an announcement of some kind going on today. Don't know what it is because it's right now. Okay, you guys are watching it? Okay, cool. Let me know what the score is. So what's happening here again is that Microsoft is taking all their lessons they learned from Windows 8 and 8.1 and coming out with Windows 10. We've been running it to different levels of work and use and all that. It's been run reasonably well, with the exception of some of the remote access stuff was a bit of a challenge. But it is definitely, from an end user standpoint, going to be a much easier jump to go from Windows 7 to Windows 10. And the reason being is because you can see this here on the far right was the Windows 8 interface. That was the start menu, and that was extremely uncomfortable to a lot of end users who were used to seeing the tree that came up on the bottom left. Well, with 10, what they've done is they've taken that menu and integrated it into the traditional Windows 7 menu. So they've made it so that it's going to still have some of the functionality, the live tiles, all that good fun stuff, but it's going to be in a traditional interface. So as of this point, until I'm corrected, people were talking about it was going to be a late second quarter of this year, possibly later release.
So do you think that maybe in about a year they're going to do the same thing with Windows 7 that they did with 2003 and XP? They're going to make it.
They will do
usable?
it. They're already doing it.
No.
But keep in mind, they've been doing it for years.
Okay.
So what will happen is, because XP came out in 2003, so there was about 11 years, about 10 or 11 years before XP was truly retired. The same thing's true with Vista, the same thing's true with 7, and there are stages of release. So for example, right now, Windows 7 will no longer receive upgrades in terms of performance or new features. Security, yes, as of about a month or so ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that happened with Vista a couple years ago. So but it's going to be several years, like 5 or 6 years before Windows 7 is retired the same way XP goes, okay? And it makes sense. I mean, no company is going to manage on the same level, especially in the IT world where this stuff changes literally overnight. You can't do that. So there is going to be a decline in support for older systems. Now keep in mind, as we've said several times here, is both Office, Windows Server, Windows Desktop, SQL, Exchange, all of these things get updated every 2 years now. And they have been for several years. So really since about 2008. So you're going to see more and more of these, they're retiring. You know, and that's just the cost of doing business, and you're going to have to keep that in mind as you look at both what you and your company are investing in. One of the things that is pretty much here, and we talked about this last year, and that's the hybrid model. About 4 years ago or 5 years ago, our comment was the cloud is real. You have to take it seriously. It absolutely is something to be considered in the future. About 2 years ago, we started saying the hybrid is becoming more and more prevalent. The hybrid being that some of your resources are local, some of your resources are in the cloud. Now, absolutely, the hybrid is here. And what I mean by the hybrid is exactly the way things should be in this situation, and that is that your resources are where they should be. It's as simple as that. If your organization is pretty much everybody is working in at this location and you need the resources dedicated, then on-premise makes sense. If your organization is dispersed, people working all over the place, there's really no centralized office, then the resources should be in the cloud. If you have combinations, and by resources we're talking about, you know, what do your customers need? What do your vendors need? What do your peer groups, however you define them, need? Let's do both. Let's have it so that some resources are local, some resources are in the cloud, and they synchronize and integrate. Now, this is a plumbing issue as much as it is anything else, because as we've also said, if you've got an internal network, we were talking to one of our clients about a strategy for this, where they wanted remote access. Their internal network runs at 1,000 megabits per second, a gigabit, okay? It means 1,000 megabits of data flow constantly between the servers and the workstations. When the people are off-site, it's more like 6 megabits per second. Okay, there's a big difference between that. The experience that you have, depending upon the application, is, you know, 6/1000th the speed that they have when they're at the office. You have to plan. Well, what would be cool, and we've already dealt with the issue here, is if the data is both in the cloud and locally. So you have this integration, the synchronization of the data. Now, if you looked at it, we want data. We want it locally connected to the network because that's where it's fastest. We want it remotely connected to the network so I can work from home but on the corporate data. I'm not connected to the network. I still want to get access to it so it's on my system and using somebody else's computer. Whether or not, and by computer I could mean tab, I really should say device here, whatever the device is. This is the tough one, not connected to the network. If you're Amish style, so you've only got this device, then whether the data is over at a location or if it's up in the cloud, this person has trouble connecting to it unless there's already a copy on their computer, in which case then we have what happens to the changes when they get back online. But these are the circumstances that really make the hybrid model work well. Because if they're not connected locally to the network, then we're going to have speed issues. But if they're connected to the cloud, then we don't have to worry about what the local speed issue is at the company, that they only have a 1 megabit pipe. Okay? Here's a statistic that just came out earlier this week. The cloud is now 1/3 of all IT infrastructure spending. Okay? Every dollar that companies are spending on IT infrastructure is going to, 1/3 of it is going to the cloud. Now, think about that in terms of adoption of new technologies and all. That's ridiculously high. servers shipped, 4 companies on this planet are buying 20% of all servers that are sold today. Anybody want to take a shot at who they are?
Google, Facebook, Amazon. Amazon, yeah.
Google, yeah. Amazon, yeah. Not Facebook.
Really?
Nope. Third one?
Who's the 4 companies buying all these servers?
Cleveland Clinic.
Microsoft
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
and Alibaba.
Oh,
Alibaba. Oh, yeah. China. Huge, huge, huge company. You could basically, if I remember correctly, you could basically put Amazon, Facebook, and a couple other of those guys together. They'd be about that size. They are ridiculously large. Those 4 companies, 20% of the servers.
Actually, it was just announced on the Windows 10 stuff.
Now Windows
free-
11.
No. Free one-time upgrade for any 8.1s, Windows Phone 8.1, and Windows 7 to 10.
Ooh, free upgrade?
So there's going to be, okay, for those of you online, it was just announced by Microsoft literally just now that they are going to do a free one-time upgrade from Windows 7, 8, 8.1, or Phone 8 up to 10.
The question, what version are you running, will cease to make sense. That's
There you
the
go.
goal.
Cool. The last point I want to make on this slide is a discussion concerning growth plans isn't what it used to be. For all purposes, when we talked with companies about what are your growth plans, we would talk about how many more widgets are you going to make, and you know, how much more production is there going to be, and how many employees are you going to do. So how busy you're going to be and how big. And that growth was pretty much in this size, or we're going to acquire. Now when we talk about growth, we also have to talk about growth in terms of where's your reach. Are you looking to have your customers deal with your data? Are you looking to have your vendors deal with your data, or vice versa? Are you looking to have much more interaction? Are you looking to have more of a remote workforce? Are you looking to have more resources available online, cloud-based, offline, or the like? In which case you're talking about the growth is really not so much a dollars or a numbers game, but now it's a what's the capacity and what kind of flexibility you're looking for your workforce. There's 2 technologies that are receiving a lot of press and a lot of attention. I don't think they're ready this year for the small, medium business, and I'll explain that in a second, but they're going to be. The first one is integrated telephony. And what I mean by that is to have an organization where all phones, they can either purchase standalone desk phones or use their computers or use their mobile phones and still look like they're a company in terms of having extensions, direct dial numbers, forwarding callbacks, and they could be all across the country, if not the world. Now, those services are there for small companies, or those services are there for phone only, or those services are there for large companies who want to purchase the infrastructure. But they're not quite there yet for that company that has 20 to 100. You know, the 20 to 100, they can get the phones, you know, for example, like Ohio.net's a good company that has this kind of service. But to get those phones where they integrate fully with their, you know, their CRM, their Outlook, their whatever, that's not quite there. And if you take a look at some of the online conferencing, for example, what Microsoft is doing with Lync integrates very nicely and can actually, between that and Skype, and by the way, Lync is now, is it official yet? It's coming. They've announced that they're going, Lync is going away and it's going to be replaced with Skype for Business. Okay? But the whole idea of right now, you can actually do this, integrate with your phone system, but you need a Lync server. So there's going to be more and more work done on that. But this, I think, is going to be huge in the next year or so. And then completely cloud-based infrastructure, including desktops. So what I mean by that is for an organization, again, small companies can do this very easily, larger companies can do this very easily, where essentially the desktops can actually be iPads, they can be whatever, but the desktop experience is exactly the same because it's hosted in the cloud. It's kind of either a terminal server or remote desktop, if you're familiar with those technologies, that's in the cloud. Now, those services are out there. They're absolutely out there. You can get them. They're still a little bit pricey, and they're still aimed, I think, at either larger organizations or they're aimed at very small organizations. Brandon.
Just to add something to that, Adobe and Google are currently working together to start doing something like this. Adobe moved to like their Creative Cloud licensing.
Right.
And what they're working is for Chromebooks, actually full Adobe suite, and it comes with your Creative Cloud licensing that runs on your Chromebook through a remote app.
Right, so Adobe, to repeat what Brandon was saying, Adobe and Google are working together with some of their integration for the cloud-based applications alike, and actually Microsoft is also working with Google. They've got some Chrome, they're in beta, I think, right now for a version of Office that runs natively on their Chrome as well. Plus, if you take a look at what Microsoft has done with their Azure, their cloud servers, they're starting to, they haven't done it yet, but they're starting to really work their way into remote desktop licensing through the cloud. So it's getting there. And it's definitely available, but they're not in what I would call standard and stable configurations. And the stable by this is not necessarily the technical stable, it's as much that the pricing and the packaging are stable. I think over the next 12 months, and you've seen a lot of, the amount of work that's been done over on Microsoft, especially with the Azure, is amazing over the last 6 months. It has matured so incredibly much. But most of it's been on the server level. I think you're going to see a lot more on the desktop level through remote desktop services through Microsoft over the next year. So in any case, these are two technologies, the telephony and the cloud-based infrastructure, that if your company really needs this, it's out there. If your company can afford to wait 6 to 12 months, I think you're going to see a better, more mature packaging of the product, not just the product itself.
Do you think Windows 10 is going to be perfected and it's not, if we only get one free upgrade once, should we wait a while because they still have bugs in it?
No matter what you do, a friend of mine told me, and this literally was about 25 years ago, the definition of obsolescence in IT is, does it work? If it works, it's obsolete. Okay? Every program, every operating system, every single one of these has issues, has problems, has bugs, has fixes. The challenge is they also have benefits. They have additions. They have new features. They have new functionality. I don't want to say it's a crapshoot, because by the time it's out, you're going to know. But you have to understand. Now, the biggest challenge, in my opinion, is if you have old technology, whether it be software or hardware, the older it is, the more likely it's going to have compatibility problems with the new stuff. That's basically like having your World War I biplane sitting out back, and you just took delivery of this new jet engine. Yeah, let's strap that puppy on. It's for an airplane. It should work.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Now the challenge is also, from an organizational standpoint, is do you want to standardize? And there's essentially three models for that. The model number one is that we have one set, there's one version of desktop. Everybody's on Office X, everybody's on Windows Y, everybody's using these Dells or these HPs or whatever, and then every 3 years we get whole new ones. Okay? The good news is everybody's on the same version. The bad news is it makes it a little tougher towards the end of it. You're purposely buying, or you have older hardware, towards the end of 3 years. Okay, and you have this capital expense unless you're leasing or doing a hardware as a service. The second methodology is we're going to, every year, we're going to upgrade a third. So every 3 years we've upgraded everybody, but we're doing it kind of a, staggered step. That has good, bad, and indifferent versions as well. And the third one is, we buy stuff when we need it. Now, the third way is the easiest to do from an organizational and management standpoint. It's the worst to do in terms of support. And again, I get back to this is as much of a management question as it is an IT question. What's your cash flow? How do you want to plan it? How do you want to handle training? How do you want to handle support? Okay. A lot has been made. We actually even put this out last year. or even 2 years ago, a lot of people talk about the Internet of Things. This is becoming more and more of an issue where we have so many resources that are available online and wherever that we have all of these devices that are actually not necessarily servicing or serving an individual user. They're just out there. Okay? These aren't going anywhere. These are absolutely there, and Cisco and other companies along those lines have made a ton of marketing investment talking about this. However, we also have the user internet. This is becoming just as much of an issue, if not more so. The user internet is essentially a single person, the user, wants to have same access regardless of what device. I want to be able to use my Windows phone. I want to be able to use my Android phone. I want to be able to use my laptop. I've got a Windows 10 tablet. I've got a, please don't judge me. I have a Windows Vista desktop. I have an iPad. I want to be able to have access to the exact same data on every one of those things. Okay? And even if I'm on somebody else's computer. Once in a while, I know this will come as a shock, I'm lazy, and my wife's laptop is closer to me than 5 feet away, you know, where one of my 10 other computers are. My wife has absolutely nothing work-wise installed on her. I can still access the data. I can log on to the cloud and go have access. The user internet, now, in order to keep these things all integrated, that to me has just as much of an impact in terms of the design, both from a business perspective as well as from a personal consumer perspective. And the experience that someone has, if you choose a website as a company, who's the person going to your website? Is that a person who is using a phone? Is that a person using a tablet? Is that a person using a laptop or a desktop? Do you need to make the investment to make sure that it's reusable? That a person is going to have a good experience regardless of what they use? That's an additional investment in terms of design and technology and all that good fun stuff. And then this is the third one, the data internet. And we've all talked about this, we've all heard about this, and we want the same resources from several devices. And we've talked about big data, okay? And we've all talked about these huge consolidations of data sets and all that. But there's also big questions and big answers. Okay, now we've spent the time gathering the data, now we can actually start using it. Context-aware applications. These are applications that actually understand the data need based on context. The best example is, as you can see, I'm a health nut. As in, I will not work out unless I absolutely have to. So I was on my Android, and I was walking a track for, we'll call it working out, and I was listening to music. I did about 2 laps in the track, hardest 3 hours I ever spent, and a pop-up ad came up that wanted to know if I wanted to buy a pedometer.
Wow.
Okay, now think about that. Not only was GPS apparently involved well enough to know that I was moving in this direction, a circular, almost circular direction, and repeated it, therefore I must be on a track. Or lost. Yep, this is more likely. In which case then it's a pop-up from my wife going, turn left. But also a company, I mean, this was not a, pedometer king or whatever. This is just a reseller company. But a company who had access to this data, Google, contacted these pedometer people or vice versa and said, based on this situation, under what circumstance would a potential customer be interested in your product? Well, if they're doing a track run, or if we can tell that they're working out. So now companies can actually ask the questions and be aware based on the context of the information, and this information is now real time. It's not we'll analyze it 2 hours later and send them an email. It's no, we see you're doing that right now. It's situational data. So now when we're companies who are looking to sell our product, we can now create situations, contact the people who are using this data, and come up with a completely new and different model for marketing and advertising where we're pushing people. We know they're doing this.
It's like
It's creepy.
we're being
It's-
watched.
It's like being in your bathroom and you're trying to brush your teeth and you realize you're out of toothpaste and your mirror tells you there's somewhere in the cupboard or something.
I told you we should have told her that she was out of toothpaste. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to put on my other business hat though. But I want to sell you toothpaste.
Wow.
And it's kind of like the same thing from a junk mail standpoint, okay? And when I am or email when we do our newsletter. So about 22% of people open up our monthly newsletter, okay? Which makes me wonder what's wrong with those other 78% of people. Because they obviously don't realize how incredibly cool our newsletter is. By the way, I don't open a lot of my email. When I get the email and I don't need it, I'm not interested in it, it's annoying. Same thing for when I get junk mail and the snail mail stuff. But when I'm trying to give it to you, then you're annoying because you're not calling me immediately, which you really, really should. And the problem is sometimes the match is a good match. It would be nice to know before I run out of toothpaste that I need to get toothpaste like a week ahead of time so I don't run out. That's convenience. That's actually cool. And the problem is that when we talk about situational data, no one's figured out what the difference between the two is. Okay? So that we can actually be useful, and we being the people who are trying to market and sell, useful on time and all that kind of fun stuff without being annoying. And the problem is you could have the exact same situation with the exact same action to totally different people, and one is going to be, oh, thank you, you just made it so I know to buy toothpaste. Yes! And that the other person is going to be, seriously, my mirror? And this is the problem, okay? And again, 20% of all servers are purchased by 4 companies, okay? This is going to get so convoluted. And actually, in some ways, really cool. In some ways, really creepy.
Is it becoming legal for companies to spy on us through our cameras on the laptops? I mean, should we be covering those with tape? Because you hear about
Yeah, please, because we're really some of the things. No,
You know, I mean,
here's the challenge. Most of us, when we install apps on our phone, we don't pay attention to what it says it has access to. We just say, yep, go ahead. They're not spying on us. We gave them permission. We said, come on in. We said, go ahead and look. Again, I get back to the flashlight applications that need access to your contacts.
Yeah, why?
You know, seriously? But, and it's not so much those guys are bad guys. I mean, because they are. A majority of those applications are spyware, all right? But it's the fact that all of us are going, you know, that's great because I want to be able to see in the dark. And what's the harm in sharing all the contact information for my friends? Okay? So there's a huge thing going on, and this is becoming an issue because 3 or 4 years ago, there wasn't a lot of business being performed on mobile devices.
So seriously, a flashlight, that's all that is something to shine, make your phone come on so you can see the
Yeah.
dark? And they're giving that information away so you
Absolutely.
have that?
The top flashlight application on Android devices, but here's the issue. The one that doesn't ask you for that.
but I mean, do you know of one? So.
Honestly, I don't pay because I have a flashlight. But here's the challenge. Here's the thing. The application that was my favorite example, and they actually upgraded so they don't need it anymore, which is really annoying, had, I think, 100 million downloads, literally. All right? 100 million people downloaded this application, and the first thing it asked was, basically, can I have access to everything? And it was a checklist. It wasn't a long 6-page EULA document. You didn't have to scroll down to see that it needed access to everything. And over 3 million people had rated it 4.5 stars out of 5. So, we no longer, with those numbers, we can't say this small segment of people don't pay attention. It's more than a small segment, and it probably includes most people in this room, including me. All right? And not only did we say it's okay, but we actually took the time to go back and say we love it. So it's one thing, and the problem is it's one thing to get really upset at Target or any of the company because they allowed their data to be breached, while at the same time we're installing applications like there's no tomorrow on our mobile devices that basically say it's not breached, we invited them in. And at the same time, we're doing more and more financial applications and financial transactions on these devices, and we're having access to more and more corporate data. So the challenge becomes one of these guys, you know, this whole concept of security is becoming more and more dependent upon these. Google Glass. Here's the thing about Google Glass, and this is where Brandon and I are going to agree on most parts, but I'm going to disagree with them on a couple because it's fun, is Google Glass, Google did a disservice, both to themselves and to the early explorers, of which I am one, and I spent maybe half an hour being one, but I've got Google Glass and all that kind of fun stuff, is that this device was marketed with much more implication that it was going to be the solution. And you'll notice for the first year or so, it was riding high. It was the coolest thing since sliced bread. It was fantastic. It was great. And then went kind of nosedived. Okay? And there's all sorts of reasons why, good, bad, or indifferent. But here's the bottom line, is Apple did the same thing 20-some years ago, almost 30 years ago, with the Apple Newton. The Apple Newton, for those of you who are older and remember, was actually one of the first mass-marketed PDA, public or private digital assistants. It didn't have a phone. It really couldn't connect to much of anything, but it was cool. All right, and it was a failure. No applications, not a lot of use, not a great vision, all of that kind of fun stuff. But man, it had the press eaten out of Apple's hand as far as how cool this thing was to start with. And then later on, I was like, eh. So about 5 years or so later, this was mid-'80s, I think. About 5 years or so later after that, the Palm Pilot came out from US Robotics. Instant success. Absolutely fantastic. PDA launched the whole technologies and all that. So bottom line was the Newton was a failure, but everybody learned from it. And they learned what worked, what didn't work, and were able to do some really cool things as a direct result. So the question is, and like I said, we've got an article on our bizblog.simplex-it.com. We've got an article that points to a couple others. They're basically moving this out of the testing and development group and moving it into another group. And there's going to be a next version of this coming out. And the question is it going to be Google or is it going to be somebody else? And actually it'll be both. So I don't think it's not going to succeed as it currently exists, but the product is definitely coming.
I mean, was the purpose of it so you don't have to use a computer all the time? It's just, the whole purpose of the Google Glass was just portable convenience?
Micro interactions, is what I would call them. Just little bits of information as you need them, when you need them, and how to
Instead of having to look at your phone.
Yeah.
Well, and if you think about it, and that was part of the challenge with this and with some of the other devices that Brandon has. Actually, because I got the camera on. Yep. So what was happening is that it was challenged, Google was challenged to come up with, and developers were challenged to come up with applications that really took advantage of this. So some of the applications that were really cool was, for example, one where you look at a street sign that's in a different language and it'll show you what the translation was automatically. The other one that I thought was really cool was some of the translations that would happen where someone would be talking to you in a foreign language or even in English, and it would give you subtitles. So to be able to do those kind of things, and again, it's non-invasive. You just get this little pop-up, so you don't have to do this. The challenges or the opportunities are really cool. And another one was where a doctor was doing was performing surgery, and there was a class across the country that was watching the surgery from the doctor's perspective to learn how to do that surgery.
Wow.
They actually had
That's
an
cool.
issue in the surgery and had to call in a consulting surgeon, and the surgeon just hopped in the video call, looked at it, and told him what to do.
Wow.
There's actually some really cool medical software that
Yeah.
wrote that.
How distracting is that when you're driving?
Not at all.
It is to everybody else who looks at him and go, oh God, he's got one of those.
Yeah.
What, a police officer charge
So,
you with like being
I've actually,
distracted?
there was a ticket given to someone named Cecilia Abity in California for wearing glass while driving, and actually got thrown out in court. They actually
Really?
reversed it, and actually the Boston Police Department is beginning to use these with their officers.
Wow. And is that thing on your arm have something to do with it?
Sort of. This is a whole nother.
So here's the issue, and one of the things, oops, when I was talking about this, is the Borg, resistance is useless or futile. So wearable computing is kind of the catch-all category that the glass fell into, and the idea being that you're wearing something that's actually useful. So you want to do a bit of an inventory?
Watches
Oh,
too.
so this is my smartwatch, one of the three.
Wow.
That's connected to my phone, and I get content on there. I then have glass.
Oh, that's not new. Dick Tracy had that years ago.
Usually, depending on the week, I will have an NFC chip on my arm. It's just like it looks like a little sticker. You can't really notice it's there, and they actually.
So when we lose him, we're able to.
It actually integrates with my phone. I just tap my phone against my arm, and it it does things. I'll use that for like unlocking my phone. So I just like pull it out, tap it, instead of trying to swipe in a pattern. I'm lazy like that. And then this one is called Mayo. This is actually really new, and it uses what's called electromyography by using a bunch of sensors in each of these little blocks. Looking at the electrical impulses in the muscles in your arm, and then using finger and hand gestures controlling your phone or your computer. So, I was trying to convince Bob to let me hook it up to his laptop so he can just swipe through the slides, but he didn't tell me for that.
Yeah, it was 15 minutes before we actually started, so.
Wait, so what's the purpose of that though?
This?
Yeah.
Convenience.
Is it making America lazier and fatter?
Yeah, I would come over and.
I thought that was soft drinks.
But no,
It's everything. It's a
I
package.
know, it's just kidding.
One of my favorite applications for something like this is actually from Elon Musk, who
I know, I've been writing about him in school.
who, if you are not familiar with Elon Musk,
Yeah.
is the founder and CEO of SpaceX, Tesla. He's one of the founders of PayPal. Really smart guy, and he was using this sort of thing, leap motion and whatnot, to actually manipulate 3D images of rocket parts for their engineers. So when you're in engineering, you can use this, manipulate your 3D object to change it as if you were just interacting with it.
Think about this for a second, because this is a really good point on that.
Good way that I like to compare this sort of thing to is Minority Report. Anyone here seen Minority Report?
Yeah, but I don't remember.
He has that big screen and they're just moving stuff around and doing things. It's like that.
Part of the challenge is the 20th century way of thinking of things was we have to put it in front of you and then you have to manipulate it. That's kind of the way that the world has been, which is also very expensive because then we got to put these things in front and everybody else gets interrupted by seeing it. Now what's happening is we're finding ways to bypass this. Whether it be we're going to have Google Glass or, we're going to have implants before we're dead, most of us, okay? May not want it, it's going to happen. But the idea is that we can see things that are basically given to us visually, so 1 sense down, and we can actually reach out and through these gestures manipulate these objects that don't exist. So, we can see prototypes of things. We can move things around and with gestures essentially tell the systems what we want to have happen. So think about this in terms of, we need somebody to load this truck with these very, very heavy objects. Well, instead of me lifting them, carrying, because I'm, drinking soft drinks and getting fat and lazy, I can actually make the gestures so that a device will pick them up. I can see what the device sees, and I can actually have the stuff stacked and put in. Or I'm doing surgery, but I'm doing microsurgery, but the view is so expanded that I can make what I consider to be very human-like gestures, but the reaction of the actual device or tool is microscopic. Okay? These are things, the whole thing is that until about 4 years ago, you either typed it in or you clicked. That was it. That's how you got stuff into a computer. Now you can do it by seeing, you can do it by speaking, you can do it by making hand gestures, you can do it by having a stick-em on your arm. You can do all of these things, and if you look at it simply as a better way of doing spreadsheets, you're missing it. And I love Minority Report, but that's my one problem with it, is the fact that it limits it to, I'm basically on a laptop, but it's really big in front of me.
They're actually, the company behind this, Stalmic Labs, is working with DARPA to work on, for people who are deployed in the military, to actually control their robotics through things like this. So instead of trying to, go in and do this, you just give hand gestures to a little all-terrain vehicle thing, and
That's cool.
it'll go and do its thing. And you just direct it with this, or with the drone. You just they have quadricopters that you can just move your hand.
Yeah.
Wow.
So cool.
Thanks. This is a nice slide, which kind of gets to the top level of things. When we look at CIOs, the people who are responsible for the company's IT, and this is a Hitachi, and it's kind of for larger companies, but it used to be we were concerned about infrastructure. Really, a CIO is now driven by services. What are the services that they're using and providing to their customers, or what are the services that they're purchasing as services as opposed to purchasing the infrastructure? And this is a cool one. I like this one. IT agility versus business agility. The IT agility, how can we adapt to the newer technologies? How can we do this? Now it's the business that has to be agile. The business has to adapt to some of the newer opportunities, to some of the, the broadening of the cloud, or the availability of information for, again, customers, vendors, or the like. And the CIO they have to know this. I mean, they've always had to know theoretically of the business, but now the business has to be agile as well. So, and information, yeah, we're interested in that, but we're also interested in innovation, because that's what drives this. Okay, I literally, I like the slides okay, but it's this one piece that I really just find it hits home big time. Okay, and we're kind of, IPv6, I dedicate this to Kevin, because we've talked about this for a couple of years. If you want to just real brief.
The sky's falling.
Yep.
Actually, the sky is almost out. So with IP, Internet Protocol, IP, every device, cell phone, laptop, even Bluetooth technically has its own devices or addresses as well. There's only so many addresses. The IPv4 space limited to 4.2 billion addresses. That's 2 to the 32nd. IPv6 expands that. That's 2 to the 128. So that's 380 lots and lots of zeros after it. Basically, we're not going to run out any day soon. The running out piece. So of that 4.2 billion addresses, obviously there are a lot of devices out there, and we're only adding more. Right now, North America, well, back up. Of the 4.2 billion addresses, they're divided into /8s, basically 256 chunks of giant addresses. We are out of chunks. There's only 0.41 left of North America's allocation of the chunks. We're running out. The current exhaustion rate should put it somewhere in May, where that last 0.41 that's dedicated to North America is completely used up. So what does that mean for us? Well, initially, not a whole heck of a lot. But for your places like Level 3, Time Warner, Comcast, all the really, really high up places that make the internet work, they won't be able to get addresses anymore, any brand new ones. They will have their little pools they can use, but once those are out, well, you're stuck using IPv6. I just looked at Google this morning. Google is getting less than 6% of their traffic over IPv6. That means everything, pretty much everything, is still running on the old IPv4. Well, when things start running out later this year, you know, what's going to start happening? Well, people are going to stop being able to get to stuff because your computer, especially like XP 2003, the older ones, they just don't know how to work with IPv6. It's one of my projects for the last year, and you know, going forward, I'm actually going to put more effort into it this year, more energy into it. You know, how can, as a business, what does that really mean for you? Again, initially not a whole heck of a lot, but it's something that needs to be considered going forward, so that way you can access, you know, the old IPv4 stuff and the new IPv6 stuff. It's nothing that crazy. There doesn't even have to be costs for some setup, but it's something that does need to be addressed. And going forward, it's only going to be more and more important.
The question in my mind is, as people vacate 4 to 6, what's to stop other people from using those old 4 addresses now that they're available again? So 4 never goes away.
It probably never will get released. Things are going to be running dual stack, you know, both IPv6 and v4. I mean, I can't see them letting go of the old stuff. Yes, maybe eventually, but I mean, you're talking decades at this point before someone would really let go of that v4. Because
And isn't the
they like their
European
XP
Union
computer.
mandating 6 now?
There's nothing mandating 6.
Okay.
Everything has been voluntary. So, you know, to use IPv6 with Google and all the other places, you have to set it up yourself. There's really no one to go to for support for it. You have to do your own education on it. You have to do your own setup, configuration, etc., etc.
Yeah, the key thing right now for consumers is don't worry about it. Okay? It's really the key thing.
It's just assigned for us, right? I mean, I never like applied for an
Right.
IP address.
Absolutely.
It
That's-
just appeared somehow.
That's
in
why
the
we're saying.
system.
That's why we're saying, from a consumer standpoint, don't worry about it. For a company, the really one thing you need to is, if you are buying equipment, you just need to say, is it IPv6 compatible? Which most stuff sold today is. But you need to just ask that question. And as new services, new companies with new websites come out, we're going to start seeing some of them be only IPv6. And IPv6 actually is not just it gives more numbers. There's also some other, it's more secure. It's a lot easier to do what we call a VPN, all that kind of thing. There's other functions and features as well. So it's really, the key is from a business.
It's easier to work with. It's amazing people have.
You don't have to worry about. So most houses and most devices use something called NAT, which is Network Address Translation. It's how IPv4 is working today. Had we not implemented NAT, we would have ran out of addresses years ago. NAT is a crutch. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are brought up with NAT think that's the way things are supposed to be, and it really isn't. It's a horrible implementation of making data move around. IPv6 will correct those issues.
Cool. Great. And we've only got about a minute or so. So, as I said, you know, stuff isn't secure. If you think if it's available, it's not secure. Ransomware. And I just want to spend like 1 minute on this guy. Vulnerability is directly proportional to the flexibility the organization has in sharing it. You know, the more opportunity you give appropriate people to access data from appropriate places in appropriate ways, the more vulnerable it is, unless you're taking explicit steps to protect that data. And that's going to be one of the topics we talk about next month, as far as actual security strategies for businesses. And actually, that's pretty much, and we're just about on time.